It can now be considered even more dangerous to be pregnant in the state of Louisiana. A new in-depth report by a consortium of advocacy groups interviewed dozens of doctors and patients in the state and found Louisiana's ban on abortions after the Dobbs decision has significantly changed care for the worse.
This is not a surprise. This is literally what we've been saying was going to happen. Like, we said this. We said, when you go after one group of people, when you decide that you're going to make a certain group of people a target, or when you decide that women don't know what's best for them, you're not just going to affect the women who you are trying to demonize or who you are trying to minimize. You're going to affect a whole lot more people. The United States is the only industrialized country, the only, quote, wealthy country in the world that is experiencing these rates of maternal mortality. So you've got all these people dying. And instead of saying, hey, we need to do things to address the fact that we are the United States, we purport ourselves to be the richest nation in the world, yet we have people dying from childbirth and we have infants dying at alarming rates as well. Instead of saying, let's address that, the GOP decided, let's attack women, let's go after women, let's go after reproductive health care, let's go after people's right to choose for themselves, let's insert ourselves in between the doctors and the patients. Let's do that instead. Doctors are literally scared to do their job. They could face prison, they could face $200,000 in fines, and they could face loss of their medical license. So, you know what a lot of doctors are deciding to do? They're like, you know what? I had a good run. This was great. I think I'm just going to retire now. And you know what else doctors are deciding to do? Or I will say pre-doctors, medical students, they're saying to themselves, I want to be able to practice in my full scope. I don't want to have to worry about these things. So I am going to move to a state where I can actually practice these things. Or medical students say, you know what, things are getting kind of hazy. We have Donald Trump and people in the GOP floating the idea of a national abortion ban. I think I'm just going to choose a different area of medicine altogether. So what happens is we have a fallout of older doctors that retire and say, I'm done with this, but we do not have any incoming new doctors wanting to fill in that gap. And what you get is a gap in care. You get deserts where they're literally county upon county right next to each other, where there are no OBGYNs. And not just no OBGYNs, you have hospitals that will do everything else for you but deliver your baby. They're like, nope, can't do that. I also even heard a report that they're now having to train emergency room doctors and emergency room nurses to prepare for someone to come in labor because there's no one else to do it. So people are now going to have to start going to the emergency room to get maternal care. That's not the direction we want to go in, especially when we have such high numbers of people dying from pregnancy-related deaths in the first place. We are going in the wrong direction. So what does all this mean? Let's just putting it all together. When you ban abortion care, you do not just affect the person that you feel doesn't deserve to have choices for themselves. You affect every single person that needs to interact with reproductive health care. This is not just me saying it. This is not just me going, ha ha, I told you so. This is me showing you the data. We have actual data that shows this. And we already had data that showed the long-term effects of forcing people to continue pregnancies that they didn't want to continue. Now we're seeing, we had data on how it affected that person, but now we're seeing how it affects whole communities, whole entire states, and it will affect our entire nation. So that's why the upcoming election is so important. You've got one person on the ticket that's talking about national bans.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
There has to be some form of punishment.
You got a person on the ticket that is, trying to feed their rabid red base and coming up with some of the most ridiculous policies that could absolutely, positively, not just harm people in our country, but kill people in our country. That's not hyperbole. We have the numbers. Then you have another person on the ticket that is doing all that they can to protect reproductive health care.
Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. It's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following: women are not without electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're wrong about that.
The thing about it is the GOP knows this. The GOP knows that right now they are losing the battle when it comes to reproductive health care. They bit off more than they can chew. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, which can be directly attributed to one of the people running for office right now. When they overturned Roe v. Wade, the GOP all of a sudden realized they got ahead of their skis. And they're trying everything in their power to not talk about all these negative consequences, to not talk about the fact that hospitals are closing or that people are dying in their communities because of their decisions. But that's where it's incumbent upon us to keep this conversation going. We have to keep talking about this. Louisiana is just one state. Other states, the data is quite clear. In the states that have the most restrictive abortion care or reproductive health care laws and policies, those states also have the worst maternal outcomes. That is data. You all know I'm in science. I love looking at data. I love looking at statistics, and it's there. It's right there in front of our faces. So the evidence is clear. There's a clear correlation between restrictive reproductive policies and poor maternal outcomes. But there's also now data that shows it's not just about people trying to have babies. It's about all women. And so that is what we need to think about as we go through this election season, as we make our way to the ballot box. This is an issue that is not as worse as it can get. It's really bad right now. But as bad as it is, it can actually get worse if we do not do all that we can to make sure that the people in positions of making these decisions are making decisions that will save lives instead of harm lives.